operational excellence can kill. There's a sense in which operational excellence is in fact the enemy of innovation and making portfolios that can win. So let me explain what I mean by starting with kind of different interpretations of what portfolio management means. And I've come across all three of these basic dimensions here. So the first, and probably the one that people spend the most time in, is what I call here the who of portfolio management. And this is basically focusing on the resources or project management side of portfolio management. So you're looking at who's assigned on what budgets we get, and if there's a conflict, which project slips and which one gets priority. It's absolutely essential to manage your portfolio this way, but it's not the only thing. Another side of it is the what of portfolio management. Now, this is primarily an economic question. You're dealing with prioritization, evaluation, and strategy. And in the decisions in the what may be pretty dramatic, like do we abandon areas completely or double down or pivoting, these kinds of things. It's not focused on getting stuff done. It's about where you go, whereas the one on the right is focused about getting stuff done. Now, these two areas tend to use more or less the same vocabulary, like a phrase like align to strategy, and they actually mean different things by it. And so it's really quite confusing. The third area that sometimes get thrown in portfolio management, I put as the how. This is essentially the process and governance part. That is how things really work to check and balance and keep things moving. The two, I think, most problematic ones are the what and the how. So let me give you an example here. The problem is that operations and strategy often work at cross purposes. So this who question, you could think of this as sort of operational portfolio management. And there's an analogy here that somehow the whole portfolio is a giant Gantt chart or maybe a work breakdown structure, and the purpose is to align the portfolio to accomplish some high-level goal. The strategic side, on the other hand, the analogy here is the investment portfolio. And the purpose, in a way, is to place your bets and make sure you've got enough money in the places that you're going to win no matter what happens. And you want to create as much wealth as possible in different time frames and so on. So there's a very different analogy, a very different set of concerns and considerations. Now, let me show you how they work at cross purposes. Let's look at some really good practices for operations. Make promises and keep them. I'll call that reliable promises. Get stuff done, like the operational focus. They said many ways. Bias for action. Make your list, work your list, just get it done. And tremendous budget discipline, always looking for ways to be more efficient and drive it. So I would have to agree with all those are great things. The problem is that they actually can undermine good strategy. So let me show you an example from DuPont. They had diagnosed their portfolio and had found that they had a lot of unintended consequences from good project management. So that reliable promise, which is a great operational thing, had actually created pressure on people. And over years, they had started to lower their aspirations so that they could deliver. So the focus on a project leader became, how can I make a promise I can keep, as opposed to where do I need to go to create the most opportunity for the company. And DuPont had concluded they needed visibility to the upside of their projects, and that was just a gear missing from their project management kind of systems. Second thing is that operational focus, the urgent drives out the important. And so they had a kind of clutter. So all the stuff that had to get done, every single thing that had to get done had a good reason that was immediate and pressing, a customer wanted, or there was a crisis or some new technology or some little project that could just sort of get fit in. And the problem is it added up to clutter. And they had kind of lost track of what was strategically significant and wasn't. And indeed, they had that kind of, you get a kind of a measure of how, does it fit the strategy as a metric. And it sort of became not useless because urgent gets substituted too much and making the business go. So that operational focus tends to create clutter. The last thing is this budget discipline. This has an unintended consequence of wounding projects because over time, you keep pushing people and getting less, try to do more with less. is fabulous, particularly if you're in a manufacturing line. I mean, that's probably tremendous discipline. But in terms of innovation, what happens is teams find themselves not having enough resources and then being asked to do it with less. And so they set themselves up for failure, basically, called these wounded projects. And they just cut the projects back to something they can do within the budgets rather than getting the budgets they need to succeed. And indeed, it's tied up with this low aspirations because they also change the projects such that they can be accomplished with the resources they know they can get. So you've got to make space for innovation. It's not enough to just look at operational excellence. You have to make space for it. And that requires adding a strategic kind of approach into your portfolio management lexicon and business processes. So if operational excellence is about getting stuff done, what is strategic portfolio management? What is it about? And I think of it as a forum. And it's a forum where you need to make choices about the gaps between vision and reality. And you see, there are always gaps between vision and reality. Like vision is grow and within these budgets and in these strategic areas. And reality is we don't have the best ideas yet. We don't know if this stuff's going to work. We don't have enough resources of marketing or technical R&D or whatever it is. You need to make that gap really visible and make choices about it. And too often, a portfolio management process, the operational kinds, are a kind of cover-up, right? You make a goal, and then you ask everybody how they're going to hit the goal, and then they roll that up, and you say, here's the plan to meet the goal. Well, that doesn't show what the gap is or what the choices are. It assumes that process results in a good plan. Since these things there's always a gap, you have to put spotlight on the gap. So the decisions you typically have to make about growth, right? So often companies are facing lackluster growth because their investments in innovation are incremental or ineffective. And so you want to take portfolio management and find hidden upsides and turn it into breakthrough growth. Clutter, as I said in DuPont, too many small projects are diluting management attention. People think small projects have small costs. That's actually a mistake. Small projects have huge costs because of the opportunity cost of management attention and diverting resources. It adds up to a lot. I've often found maybe 30% of projects simply don't need to be done. I mean, there are good reasons to do them, but in the grand scheme of things, they're basically clutter. So portfolio management sharpens focus by diverting resources from trivial into the projects that matter. And the last thing is conflict. In innovation, the big one is financial caution conflicting with innovative vision. It could also be conflict between different business units or vertically in the organization. And the key is to make that conflict constructive instead of destructive, and create a forum where you can align everyone on where and how much to invest, what bets we're taking, what uncertainties we're going after, and so on. Or said maybe more poetically, operational portfolio management is basically fighting over resources. And in strategic portfolio management, you're trying to get the decision forum aligned where at least everybody's looking the right way. I think harnessing them like my dog sleds, maybe that's a little too much, but at least get them to go the right way. And in here, I've shown new territory, because typically innovation is about entering new territory too. So how do you get folks pulling the same way? And it's about creating that forum for those strategic choices. That's my first surprising lesson. I would invite folks, if you want to ask a question or anything, please drop something in the chat, and Chandra will help me manage the questions. So let me move on to the second big point,